Hello, and thank you very much for joining us on this webinar, where we'll be presenting our proposal for Moreton Brook Solar Farm. So I'm Chloe, I'm the Head of Communications and Engagement here at Aura Power, and I'm joined by my colleague George, who's our Head of Planning. So this webinar is just one of the formats where we will be launching our initial proposal. We'll also be presenting our plans in person at Admaston Village Hall tomorrow, which is Wednesday the 25th of October. And we're also happy to have any separate discussions, so please do not hesitate to contact us. The slides from this webinar and exhibition boards tomorrow will also be available on our website. So before we go into the proposal itself, I just want to explain how this webinar will work. So George and I will take about 20 to 30 minutes presenting the plans, and then we'll open up the virtual floor for any questions you might have for us to answer. So your microphones will be muted for all of the session, but you should see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a speech bubble with a Q inside, where you can then type the question for us to answer out loud. We'll only be answering questions once we've presented our plans, so please feel free to type your questions at any time during the session. However, I would advise waiting till the end in case your question is covered in our presentation. Excuse me. So this webinar is also being recorded and will be available to watch again on our website. If you are watching the recorded version and have a question that has not been addressed, please do contact us. The purpose of our consultation events is to understand local views, concerns and suggestions, which we can then incorporate into our plans that we will submit in the form of a planning application to East Staffordshire Council. We would therefore like to ask you to complete a short feedback form after the webinar, which will be sent round following this session and is also available on the project page. So who is Aura Power? So we are a renewable energy developer based in Bristol. We have a team of around 50 people. We have numerous solar and battery storage sites in development, not only in the UK, but across Europe and North America. We're a joint venture partner of IB Vogt, a German engineering firm that's built over 1 gigawatt of solar farms worldwide, with 40 operational solar farms in the UK alone. Our team prides itself on developing the highest quality solar and battery storage projects while protecting local sensitivities and offering a haven for local wildlife. Our aim is to build trust with local people to develop a design that accounts for local concerns and benefits the local community. We develop projects from initial inception to ready to build, working with specialist consultants along the way. We work closely with landowners and local stakeholders to power an emissions-free world through the development of affordable solar energy and follow 3 key mission goals to do so. These are tackling the climate crisis. Solar power provides an immediate solution to fighting the worst impacts of climate change, made easier by the massive falls in costs. Enhancing the natural environment. Our sites incorporate landscaping to help biodiversity to recover and ecology to thrive. And then engaging with local communities. It is a priority of ours to work closely with the local stakeholders, like yourselves, to understand concerns and develop the best possible scheme. So why do we need solar? As we all know, we are in a climate and ecological emergency. And it's important to recognise why solar can play such an important role in the future of the energy sector and our environment. The most recent IPCC report states that the dramatic carbon reductions required globally to avoid the worst impacts of climate change can be achieved due to the massive falls in the price of energy made from solar and wind. Solar farms are not only a crucial part in bolstering the UK's energy supply, but they are the cheapest form of renewable generation. Electricity generated from solar is currently 3 times cheaper than gas and 2 times cheaper than nuclear, and can thus help to collectively bring down prices for everyone. The UK government has a legally binding target to reach net zero emissions by 2050, as well as a commitment to shift all electricity generation to 100% renewable sources by 2035. The UK government's energy security strategy sets out a 5-fold increase in solar deployment by 2035. That's the equivalent to one site this size being approved each week. East Staffordshire Borough Council has declared a climate emergency and aspires to make the authority carbon neutral by 2050. This solar farm would contribute a significant amount towards that target. The increase in solar power cannot be achieved through rooftop and brownfield sites alone. As a result, ground-mounted solar is also needed, which can also offer a haven for wildlife, with new habitats created and no disturbance from intensive farming practices. Food production can continue with sheep grazing amongst the panels, allowing the soil to rest and rejuvenate, providing a stable carbon store and often leaving the soil in a better condition than it was before. There have been a number of misconceptions about solar farms over the past year, particularly regarding food security. Solar farms can, in fact, support the farming industry and food security by lowering energy prices, continuing food production with sheep grazing, attracting pollinators to help crop growth, and addressing climate change, which is one of the leading causes of crop loss. The most recent DEFRA report on food security showed the biggest threats to food security in the UK are shortages of labour and increased costs of fertilisers, pesticides, and fuel, not solar farms. The anticipated deployment of solar across the UK is expected to require just 0.3% of the UK land, which is less than the space currently taken up by golf courses and equivalent to around 0.5% of land currently used for farming. So, selecting this site. Our proposed site is located on land to the south of Newton in the parish of Blithfield. Despite what you might think, solar irradiance levels are very good in this part of the UK, and this solar farm will be able to produce around 60,000 megawatt hours of energy per year. The total site area covers approximately 62.3 hectares of land, with just 31 hectares proposed for the solar infrastructure itself, and the remaining 50% used for mitigation, biodiversity enhancements, and screening, which we'll talk about a bit later on. We do recognise that there are a few properties close to our proposed boundary, particularly on Lear Lane itself and in Newton. We have already included landscaping, which is intended to screen the solar farm from view, and we welcome discussions with these residents to see if there's anything more that we could be doing. Finding a suitable site for a solar farm can be very difficult, as there are many constraints that need to be sensibly considered and balanced. Indeed, locating sufficient capacity on the electricity network is one of the most difficult challenges. As the electricity becomes increasingly saturated with renewable energy generation, the distribution network playing catch-up, securing a grid connection, as we have done here with WPD, is becoming increasingly challenging. The land here is relatively flat and the largest proportion of it well hidden. The site also benefits from having the potential to accommodate additional screening and mitigation measures, such as additional tree belts and hedgerows, which will also add to biodiversity net gain. As well as a secured grid connection, we believe the land is also suitable as there are no landscape, heritage, or ecological designations in or close proximity. Developing solar on farmland not only offers enough space to generate electricity, but it also allows us to boost biodiversity levels and actually improve habitats for wildlife. I'll now pass on to George, who will talk through what makes up a solar farm.
Thank you, Chloe. There are a number of different components that make up a solar farm. So firstly, most obviously, photovoltaic panels. PV panels are set out in rows with enough space between and underneath them for sheep to graze. Solar technology is advancing rapidly and will be using south-facing fixed tilt bifacial panels, which allow higher efficiency in converting sunlight to solar energy. The panels will have a lower edge of a minimum height of 0.8 meters and a maximum height of 3 meters, though it's likely to be lower when it comes to construction. Between each row, there'll be a minimum gap of around 2.1 meters, and this will enable land to be grazed underneath throughout the lifetime of the project. Moving on to inverters, these are located underneath the panels and convert power from direct current to alternating current. Transformers are used to step the voltage up so it can be distributed into the grid network, and this allows for a more efficient transfer of energy across the grid. And there's obviously a substation, and this is the point at which we connect the scheme into the grid network. Storage units are positioned around the site, and these contain spare parts, albeit they're generally located in the vicinity of the substation. With regards to how we contain the scheme, fencing for security purposes will be provided a maximum height of around 2 meters around the perimeter of the scheme. This is in the style of rural deer fencing with wooden fence posts, with space for small mammals to pass through. In part of the sites, the fencing will be secured with concrete ballast feet and will not penetrate the ground. Access tracks. With some new sites, access tracks will be built. These will be largely using existing routes and hedgerow gaps where possible. New access tracks would have the appearance of a typical farm track constructed from crushed stone and will be about 4 meters in width. The tracks will be semi-permeable and will cover in grass over time. And talking about the temporary construction compound, this is a temporary area within the site for construction deliveries and welfare facilities. This will prevent vehicles from congesting the highway. All cables that connect the panels to the transformers and then onto the substation will be undergrounded and contained within the red line boundary within the site. There is no proposals for security lighting within the solar farm when it's operational. The only lighting that may be in place will be during construction. However, as construction will mainly be taking place during daylight hours and is likely to be in summer months, lighting requirements will be minimal. Moving on to the next slide. So in terms of the design of the scheme, the solar farm will have an output of 49.9 megawatts, which is equivalent to powering around 16,000 homes or 20,000 electric vehicles every year. It will save around 12,000 tons of carbon entering the atmosphere compared with electricity generated from gas, and saves over 6 million kilograms of coal being burned for electricity annually. The panel arrays will only disturb a very small proportion of the ground, typically less than 1%, as it's typically only the posts which are placed into the ground, for the panels sit on top of the grass. This allows plenty of space for sheep to graze safely beneath them. The grass can still grow under the panels on a UK solar farm, despite the misconception that the shade prevents it from doing so. And indeed, the panels can afford the sheep from protection from bad weather and shade in summer months. We'll also be using monocrystalline silicon-based solar panels, which have up to 99% recycling efficiency. The substation is located in the south of the site. This is where we connect the electricity via underground cabling into the grid, and we'll be connecting to WPD's overhead line in the south of the site, away from existing dwellings and Lear Lane to the north of the site. We're also required to construct a new electricity tower to connect into the existing overhead line, but we do not anticipate this to negatively impact views due to its location. The operational period of the solar farm will be 30 years. Once the end of the operational period is reached, the solar farm will be decommissioned and the land returned to its former use. We believe it is likely to be in better condition than it was before the solar farm, with more trees, hedges, and wildlife. The soil will also have time to be rested, with no fertilizers and pesticides used during the operational life of the development. In addition to solar panels and associated infrastructure, the proposal will include a number of ecological and landscape enhancements, such as new hedgerow and tree planting, species-rich grassland, and wildflowers. All existing hedgerows and trees in and around the site will be retained other than where required for access. Existing hedgerows will be enhanced to make it more robust and allow to grow to around 3 meters in height, as well as planting new trees for screening purposes. We're proposing to either improve or plant, where required, new hedgerows and trees in a number of locations to screen the solar farm from view. These are predominantly located around the north, east, and western perimeters of the site. The improved grassland beneath and around the panels allows significant gains in biodiversity. Wildflowers will be sown in various parts of the site to further boost biodiversity and attract much-needed pollinators to help tackle the ecological crisis. Buffers are included to protect existing on-site ecological and archaeological features. We're also proposing a number of bird and bat boxes to encourage nesting, as well as log piles, compost, and bug hotels for snakes and invertebrates. All ponds on site will be retained, and appropriate buffers included to allow them to flourish. The bridleway that runs along the north and western boundary of the site will be planted with new native trees. There are no footpaths which cross the site, It should be noted that as solar farms are very quiet, we do not predict any adverse noise effects on homes nearby. We welcome any suggestions from members of the public or local conservation groups on how we maximise our biodiversity efforts and encourage local people to get involved in the monitoring of biodiversity, particularly much needed bee populations. So moving on to talk about construction and access. The construction of a solar farm will typically take place over a 6 to 8 month period, likely during the spring and summer months. If planning permission is granted in 2024, we would aim to start construction in 2025, but will notify the local community well in advance. The route shown here is an indicative route from the A51 via Colton Road along the B5013 and onto Lear Lane. An existing field access on Lear Lane will be used for construction vehicles entering and exiting sites. This is about halfway along the east side of the site. HGV movements will only happen outside peak times, and a contact number will be made available for any residents who have any concerns over this period. Residents along the route in the vicinity of the solar farm will also be notified in advance of construction. Where possible, we would use existing field access tracks to reach access areas of panels further within the farm site, and compacted stone will be used where existing access tracks are not adequate for HGVs. A traffic management plan will be implemented before construction and agreed with the council's highway authority. Most construction traffic will arrive on site in the first few weeks of construction, after which the number of HGVs will reduce significantly. As a solar farm requires little maintenance, after construction, there will be minimal traffic going into the site. So talking about biodiversity, we are facing an ecological emergency as well as a climate emergency. A recent study by London's Natural History Museum has shown the UK has lost nearly half of its biodiversity since the Industrial Revolution. That's more biodiversity loss than any other G7 country, and it's in the worst 10% globally. We've lost a staggering 97% of wildflower meadows since the 1930s. Political leaders are starting to take action and committed to revising biodiversity loss by 2030. Solar farms can significantly improve local biodiversity by providing new habitats and food for wildlife. A recent study by the Solar Trade Association discovered that some solar farms had up to 6 times more pollinators than adjacent fields without solar panels on. Panels sit lightly on the ground, meaning they have minimal disturbance, which allows the grass to continue to grow and the ability for sheep to graze beneath them. It also means that solar panels are easy to remove at the end of their life with minimal disturbance to the environment. Existing agricultural land can be converted to species-rich pasture, therefore adding as a stable store of carbon, a dual benefit to combating climate change and boosting biodiversity. As the fields are left fallow for the life of the solar farm, the soil will be kept healthy, boost carbon sequestration, and after the solar farm has reached the end of its life, it can be removed with much of the equipment recyclable. The land will then be returned to its previous use in a substantially better ecological condition than before. We're proposing to either enhance or plant over 2 kilometres of hedgerows, a number of new native trees and species-rich grassland and wildflowers will be planted. Bird and bat boxes are included, as well as 14 acres set aside specifically for skylark habitat. A 3 to 5 metre buffer is included all around the perimeter of the sites, along with suitable spacing between panel arrays. This will greatly benefit local wildlife, and we predict a significant increase in biodiversity levels. A full biodiversity net gain calculation will be submitted with our application once we have finalised the layout and mitigation proposals. However, given current proposals, we're anticipating a net gain well in excess of the required 10% over baseline conditions. Moving on to annual monitoring. We'll be producing a landscape and ecological management plan. This will ensure the biodiversity and ecology enhancements are maximised throughout the lifetime of the solar farm. The length will specify things such as where and how existing vegetation will be enhanced, the density of new meadow, hedges and trees, the species mix of various habitats, how habitats will be protected during construction, and how habitats will be maintained through the project. The plan will be agreed with South Staffordshire Council and will outline the management regime of the solar farm. Progression of the habitats will be monitored regularly and reports will be submitted to the council. The length will be regularly reviewed and adapted if necessary to ensure the biodiversity aims are met. We also welcome local conservation charities who may be interested in our site to get in touch with us regarding monitoring of wildlife populations. And then just moving on to survey findings to date. We're undertaking a range of surveys which have helped inform our plans to date. These include, in relation to ecology, an extended phase 1 habitat survey has been undertaken. There are no ecological designations on the site, and those in the wider area have been considered in determining the appropriate scope of surveys. We've undertaken a number of ecological surveys over the past year, including for habitats, birds, bats, badgers, and great crested newts, just to name a few. Buffers from existing ecological features, including trees and hedgerows, are included to protect habitats. In terms of landscape, the initial landscape assessment has informed the height of the solar panels, which will be limited to 3 meters to minimize visual impact. A landscape assessment will include assessment of impacts on landscape character and visual impacts for residents, road and rail users, and users of public rights of way. A landscaping plan is proposed to minimize visibility of the site and also enhance biodiversity. In terms of hydrology and flood risk, the built development is located within flood zone 1, meaning there is very low risk of flooding from rivers or seas. No high voltage equipment will be located where there is a possibility of surface water flooding. Solar farms do not contribute generally to flooding, as the array is designed with gaps to allow surface water to be evenly dispersed and absorbed by a healthy grass sward underneath. Solar farms can also include mitigation measures to help alleviate existing flooding. In other sites, we've included a flood alleviation scheme to reduce existing off-site flooding concerns as well. In terms of moving on to the next slide, in terms of acoustics and noise, a noise assessment has been carried out in accordance with industry standards. Solar farms are very quiet and do not make any noise at all during night. Residential immunity is not expected to be negatively impacted, and there are no noise-related issues anticipated to arise. In relation to heritage, a desk-based assessment and site visit has been undertaken to consider the potential impacts of development on designated and non-designated heritage assets. We're also in the process of undertaking a geophysical survey to determine the extent, if any, of archaeological interest across the site. Following this, there might be a requirement to undertake intrusive work such as trial trenching to examine further what lies below the ground. In relation to glint and glare, solar panels are designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They're considered safe to install close to airports and near major roads. The reflection from a solar farm is much less than commercial greenhouses, polytunnels, and even grass to some extent. From a distance, they appear in the landscape similar to ploughed field or a small lake. An assessment of potential impacts upon road, rail, residential, and aviation receptors will be undertaken upon the final site layout design. Any potential impacts will be mitigated either through panel removal or tree hedgerow planting. And in relation to agricultural land, we've undertaken an agricultural land survey, which examines soil samples across the site to give a more accurate depiction of soil grades. The site predominantly uses grade 3B land, which is not best and most versatile agricultural land. Thank you. I'll hand back to Chloe.
Thanks, George. Okay, so on to local benefits. So as well as the enriched biodiversity and flooding alleviation, as George has mentioned, there are a number of other local benefits that this solar farm could bring. The solar farm would contribute to the local economy and use local contractors where possible. We also feel it's important to contribute directly to the local community via a community fund. So the community fund we are offering is £20,000 a year for the lifetime of the solar farm. So for 30 years, this would total £600,000. This is significantly higher than the industry standard. This is encouraged to be spent locally on social and environmental projects, though there have been instances where it is used to contribute to local people's energy bills. Typical projects that have been funded by other solar farm projects include energy efficiency measures on public buildings, play equipment for children, church restoration, and fibre optic broadband. The administration of these funds would be managed locally, typically by the parish council or an independent trust, and we welcome further discussions with the parish council and any interested local residents on this. If you have any suggestions for how the fund could be spent, or are a local supplier who would be like to be considered in any future tendering process, then please do get in touch. We also want to help enthuse the younger generation and educate them on the importance of renewable energy. As such, we would like to encourage school visits to the proposed solar farm and educational sessions to local schools about the importance. If you are or know of a teacher from a local school who is interested in participating, then we'd love to hear from you. The solar farm will also contribute over £80,000 in business rates to East Staffordshire Council each year. Okay, so timescales. Consulting with the local community is very important to us and a critical part to getting the best possible scheme. Following this consultation, we would look to incorporate the views of the local community and interested parties into our proposal and revise our design if feasible. We'll then finalise our proposed design and planning documents and aim to submit our planning application before the end of the year. After the application is submitted, East Staffordshire Council will undertake their own consultation process and invite local residents to comment on the plans. We will continue to work with the planning officer and specialist consultees once submitted to address any comments raised. Our aim is to submit a proposal which not only complies fully with the local plan and national planning policy framework, but one which the local community can support. The planning determination period for developments of this scale can be unpredictable, but we hope to have a decision in the autumn of next year, 2024. If approved, we would anticipate construction to begin no earlier than the summer of 2025. If you would like to speak to us in person, as mentioned at the beginning, we are holding an in-person exhibition at Admaston Village Hall tomorrow on the 25th of October. It's a drop-in event from 4 till 7 p.m. If this isn't convenient and you'd still like to speak to us separately, then please do get in touch. We'll also keep you updated on the progress of the development by email as we move through the next phases. Okay, so thank you everybody for listening. We'll now answer any questions that you might have. If you haven't done so already, then please do pop your question using that little speech button at the bottom of your screen. I'll then read these questions out loud and then George or I will answer. We hope that we can answer your questions, but if we're unable to and you'd obviously like to discuss things further, then we encourage you to get in touch. So just looking at questions, we have one question in here. So the comment is, Leah Lane is narrow and already dangerous with agricultural traffic. How will the increased HGV be mitigated both during construction and later? That is a very good question. And I think George, are you able to answer that, please?
Absolutely. So we're already assessing the impacts in relation to vehicle movements during construction as part of the planning application and finding a suitable route into the site. As part of the proposal, we are trying to we will be minimising the times that HGVs will be accessing the site and the quantity that will be accessing each hour of day. So we'll be avoiding peak times of traffic, and we'll be looking to implement a certain number of vehicle movements per hour of construction day. We'll also be looking to minimise the times at which they're using Leah Lane and ensuring that there's not already a vehicle on the road for construction use, whilst another one is also arriving, etc.
Thanks, George. Probably also useful to mention that when, if the solar planning application is approved, that we'll then continue to work with the local highways authority to develop a very rigorous and detailed traffic management plan that will fully detail how the traffic is managed accordingly, with public safety as a top priority. I hope that answers your question, Jonathan. Thank you. A question here from Jackie. Do we have any decommissioned solar farms in the UK yet? What are the plans for old panels? Yes, very good question. One question that we get asked very frequently. So at the moment, there is already quite a well-established recycling process in globally and also in the UK. There are a number of quite well-established companies which do already recycle solar farms. Some solar farms, have been around already for maybe 10 years, and some of those panels within those, even though they're not fully decommissioned yet, will have to have those panels replaced. We have a full decommissioning plan in place, which is accompanied by a decommissioning bond, and that decommissioning bond will ensure that the panels are suitably removed at the end of the solar farm's life. Obviously, we anticipate for recycling rates to improve even more from through the next 30 years, and technology as well, obviously. But at the moment, the monocrystalline panels that we are using have, I think, a 96 to 99% recycling efficiency, and as I say, improving as the years go on. George, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or moving on.
Yeah, exactly. I think as the industry becomes more standardized in terms of decommissioning, etc., there's going to be a lot more investment in relation to recycling panels. I know there's already facilities opening up in France, for instance, which are looking to deal with this and are scaling up to deal with the matter, and particularly looking at extracting the precious metals that are used within solar panels and reusing them for future use.
Great, thank you, George. Another comment here from Jonathan regarding the construction doesn't solve the passing of large 8-wheelers. So I think, yeah, the construction plans, as mentioned previously, are to be determined, particularly the exact traffic management plan. As George mentioned, the number of vehicles, etc. And we do take on your comments, and we'll address those with our traffic consultant appropriately. And as I say, we'll work very closely with the Highways Authority to ensure that there is a safe route for construction vehicles, and obviously, more importantly, for local residents.
Yeah, and I think it's also a case of identifying those pinch points where they existing along the road, and informing all contractors on the site of them in advance of them accessing through our contractors, and ensuring that vehicles are aware of those, and to seek to avoid them.
Thank you, George. Another question here from Jackie. Substation, inverter and transformers on site. How are these hidden on site, as they look quite ugly? Very good question. So in terms of their location, they're relatively hidden. So if I just pop back to I appreciate these might look a little bit small on the screen that you're currently viewing these slides on. So they will also be on our project page. If you'd like me to send you a copy by post, please do let me know, and I'd be happy to do that. But you can see kind of on the right-hand side of the drawing is where Leah Lane is, which is where the access will be, and the substation and associating infrastructure there is really in the southwest of the site. So those views from any projected views from the road are very long ranging, and will be very difficult to see from that distance. We are, as George mentioned, improving the existing hedgerows, tree planting, etc. So that increased landscaping will also help across the site, and as well as around the perimeter as well.
Yeah, just to pick up on that as well. So transformers, they are scattered around the site, and there's a few of them. There's not a huge number, and they will generally be viewed as part of the panel layouts. Inverters are small and generally hidden under the panels or in and around the panels, and the substation is in the south of the site, as Chloe just mentioned, which is largely the least visible area of the site. We're also proposing to, if you just scroll back to the plan, Chloe. So in the south of the site, where there's two hedgerows proposed moving north from the brook, those are existing field boundaries which are devoid of current hedgerows, which we're proposing to be re-implemented. We're doing that across the site as well, with other hedgerows, field boundaries which have been degraded over time through sort of large commercial agricultural use. the sort of northern western boundary of the site alongside the right of way is already really well screened up until particularly the southern area of it. But we're proposing to provide new tree planting, provide a setback from that right of way, and then also infill existing hedgerows where it needs to be done. And then particularly in the northern area of that site, we're looking to improve that hedgerow and with tree planting as well. So views into the site will generally be nominal, limited. It's generally a well screened site already, but we're just seeking to improve that.
Thank you, George. It looks like that's actually all our questions. If anybody else does have any, please feel free to pop them over now. Just give it a couple of moments. Okay, I'm going to take that as the end of the questions. If you do obviously have any more that you haven't been able to ask, or something you want to remember at a later date, then obviously please do get in touch. So thank you everybody for your time this evening. We would be grateful if you could complete the survey form, which we will receive shortly after this webinar. And as mentioned, if you do have anything you'd like to discuss further, then we do strongly encourage you to get in touch. It's our main priority to engage with local residents. So yes, please do that. My contact details you can see here on the screen, and also available on our website, and also on the emails that you will be received as well. So as I already mentioned, we are holding an in-person exhibition tomorrow. That's Wednesday, the 25th of October, where we will be presenting the same information as we have done on this webinar, but obviously will be available to speak to in person. If you are watching the recorded version, you can find the feedback questionnaire on our webpage. Important to note that your personal details will not be passed on to any third parties and will only be used for the purpose of this public consultation. So thanks again, everybody, and we wish you a lovely evening, and goodbye. Good night. Thank you.
Very much. Bye.